So you're looking at a website from Phantom Pumps right now, and at Phantom Pumps we have a facility in Clearwater, Florida, where we, among other things, have a large inventory of very common in the industry self-priming trash pumps. And what you see in front of you today are a couple of 3-inch self-priming trash pumps that you'd find in a municipality or in a water treatment facility at an industrial location, designed for pumping human waste or industrial waste, typically in applications where you need a relatively large volume at a relatively low pressure. One of the more common questions we get as we are trying to help customers keep an existing pump in service or replace an existing unit or find a solution for a new application is identifying what they currently have, helping them determine if it is beyond serviceable repair or if it can be saved. And many of the questions come down to some of the more unique features that have been associated with these products over a period of time. The generic term for these products in the industry would be a T-series self-priming pump or a Super T-series self-priming pump. And in this picture on my right-hand side, you're looking at the back of a standard T-series pump. And behind me as I move back is the Super T-series pump. Those are trade names from the people that invented these products, and there are many imitators. In the world of Phantom, we call the standard T pump a PL. We call the Super T pump an XT. These pumps are more alike than they are different. However, many of the calls we get from people trying to identify their products are originated because of the confusion between which parts go in which pump. So in today's little clip, we're hoping to remove some of that mystery and let you know that for the most part, these pumps are interchangeable. As we look at the pump, many of the components that are used on the pump are in place. The discharge spool assembly, identical in both pumps. The associated gasket that goes underneath of it, identical in both pumps. The fill cover assembly, the fill cover itself, identical in both pumps. We'll come around to the front side of the pump later. There are some differences. However, on your key wear components, such as the wear plate, which is attached to the suction housing, which is visible inside the pump, again, identical between the standard T and the Super T pump. Another common component, the impeller. It's the same impeller in a standard T as it is a Super T. Another common wear component is the seal plate. This separates the bearing housing from the impeller and contains the mechanical seal. This is the same component on the standard T as it is on a Super T. Moving through the pump, the bearing cap, same part for both pumps. The gasket that goes underneath the bearing cap, the same part for both pumps. The oil seal inside the bearing cap, same part for both pumps. The shaft. The shaft is slightly different. The bearings are the same at the front and the rear, and the oil seals that ride on the shaft that are located inside the bearing housing itself are the same. A difference between these two pumps is the Super T or the XT design pump has got 2 oil seals in this area, whereas the standard T has 1 oil seal here. Ultimately, everything rides in exactly the same place inside the pump, and in theory, you could machine a standard T shaft and turn it into a Super T shaft. Again, the Super T, there are 2 oil seals here. The standard T, 1 oil seal here. They're the same parts. So if you've got a Super T, order 3 oil seals. It happens to be the same as the seal here. If you've got a standard T, order 2. If in doubt, order 3, you'll have a spare. The advantage, here's where the Super T is a better pump. The 2 oil seals give you a physical isolation between the oil in the mechanical seal cavity versus the oil in the bearing housing. If the oil seal for the mechanical seal cavity fails, that fluid leaks outside the pump as opposed to leaking inside the bearing housing, which is a common failure mode for the standard T or the PL series pumps. That said, if your PL series or your standard T pump has worked for 20 years, there's a good chance you should expect to repair it and get another 20 years out of it. The screw and the washer that hold the impeller on, same in both pumps. When you look at the two bearing frames, this is a complete rotating assembly from this 3-inch pump here. This 3-inch rotating assembly from a standard T or a PL series pump will fit perfectly in a Super T pump and function, and you'll never know the difference. Same holds true for a Super T rotating assembly. If you take the Super T rotating assembly, which we've disassembled for the purposes of this discussion, you can install that in a standard T pump and it'll work perfectly. Additionally, if you install the Super T rotating assembly in the standard T pump, you gain the advantage of the additional oil seal, which gives you the added security of not having contamination of your main crankcase oil. When you're looking at the pumps assembled from this perspective, an easy indicator of whether you have a standard T or a Super T or a PL or an XT is when you look at the sight glasses on the bearing housing. The standard T or the PL series pump has got a sight glass on the bearing housing for monitoring the oil in the bearing housing itself, the crankcase, and it's got a breather vent for the oil that's in the seal chamber. It's difficult, and we've had people forget that there needs to be oil in that second chamber. A better way of monitoring the condition of both both boxes that are containing the oil, the Super T has a separate sight glass for the seal chamber versus the sight glass for the bearing housing. And you can see these parts are well lubricated. When we assemble the pumps, as I dance across the page here, there's an O-ring that seals the back of the pump inside the casing. Rotating assembly O-ring. It's the same part on both pumps. On the front side of the pump, there's a front cover plate, which is where the wear plate attaches. We've already mentioned the wear plate is identical. The O-ring that seals that front cover is also identical. Because the front cover attaches with a different fixture system, the casing itself is not identical. Because the rotating assembly is adjusted from the front on the XT pump, which is a feature we'll get into from the other side, versus from the rear on the PL series pump, the rotating assemblies are slightly different. But again, they're dimensionally interchangeable and one can be used in lieu of the other. The front of the pumps. Suction flange assembly. This is where the flap valve assembly, which is an internal check valve that maintains the prime, is attached. The flange assembly, the check valve assembly, the pin that retains the check valve assembly, and the hinge, identical between both pumps. Where you'll see the difference in the front side of the pump is the T-Series pump has got these wing nuts for hand removal and the pressure relief valve located at the bottom. Whereas if I move over to the Super T configuration, you'll notice, although the suction spool piece is the same, we've got 4 acorn style nuts, one on each corner of the cover plate with the relief valve located at the bottom. I have had customers in a pinch put this cover plate in at a 45-degree angle and use 2 of the holes to attach it. And I've had people put one of those cover plates in at a 45-degree angle. It's not the preferred mechanism, but if your plan is down, it's a way to get running. This is a feature on the front cover of the Super T pump which has received a good amount of promotion because it allows the impeller clearance to be adjusted from the front of the pump as opposed to the original design which required impeller clearance adjusting from the rear. There's micrometer screws that allow you to position the front cover plate and change the proximity of the cover to the impeller. We'll get into more detail about the specific impeller adjustment on another film. However, that does present a difference between the standard T and the Super T. The parts are different. It's not as attractive of a feature in practice as the additional oil seal in the rotating assembly. To summarize, these same similarities between the standard T, the Super T, the PL, the XT that you see here presented in regards to a 3-inch pump also carry through for the 4-inch pump, the 8-inch pump, and the 10-inch pump. There is a 6-inch pump which has the same features and benefits. However, there are some greater differences between the 6-inch Super T and the 6-inch standard T, and that will be covered in another video. As a cliffhanger for that next video, I will tell you that the parts that are special in a 6-inch Super T come from an 8-inch pump, so they're still standard parts. Anytime any of you would like to visit our physical location in sunny Clearwater, Florida, where the temperature is always hot and muggy, our doors are open. We are a brick and mortar facility. We've got inventory piled to the sky and solutions that we haven't even dreamed of ready for your unique problems to present themselves.